What's up guys, and welcome back to Madman Music. In today's episode, we're carrying on my live rig rundown with episode 2, What's on My Pedalboard. Let's get into it. Alright guys, welcome back. Episode 1 was a lot of fun, man. We went through everything that I keep in my Inky case, which was actually quite a lot. But that's because this case has the most amount of extra space in it, believe it or not. As I mentioned in this video, I try to tour with as small and concise of a rig as possible. Luckily, I'm in a band that doesn't require me to have too much gear. We're just straight up plugged into the amp, that's it, no effects, it's just balls out all the time. So I'm able to go on tour with a pedal board that's this big, and in some cases even smaller, depending on the situation. But as I mentioned in this video, I like to go on tour with, honestly, as little as possible. If your rig is as simple as possible, there's less likely of a chance that you're going to have an issue with something in your signal path that's gonna stop the show. Meaning, a cable cuts out, or a battery dies in a pedal, or a battery dies in your guitar, or whatever the case may be, every single link in this chain could be a potential issue for your live show. You know, you don't want to have to stop playing to try to figure out what's going on stage, especially when it's kind of dark, lights are flashing, things are going crazy. That's not when you really want to be trying to figure out what's wrong with your rig and why you suddenly don't have any sound. But this is all the more reason why I love to tour with something very small and very compact. All right, so let's check out what's going on with my pedal board. First of all, I'm using the Pedal Train Nano Plus. This thing is a nice, small, compact pedal board that still has enough room to allow you to put an actual power supply underneath, which is really nice. We're gonna get to that a little bit later. But right off the bat, what you can tell with this thing, it's a heavy-duty gig bag style case, which in my experience is kind of enough. You know, there's a lot of hard shell cases out there. Most of the time, these things just add lots of extra weight. And if you're careful enough with your gear on tour and it's not literally just being thrown, you're gonna be okay with the heavy-duty gig bag. It's gonna serve its purpose and it's gonna keep your pedals protected. But the first thing that you'll notice with this thing is that it is a nice compact size. The bag is pretty heavy duty. It's got a nice grip that when you put the two handles together, they Velcro together with a nice little grip. All this stuff, really nice. It actually comes with a strap. Like, I guess if you wanted to, you know, strap it over your shoulder and walk around with your pedal board, you could do that. I took the strap off because it doesn't really do any good for me. So that's all right. But when we break this guy open and we open this mammer jammer up, nice big heavy duty zippers, awesome. So let's open it up, and right off the bat, the first thing we've got is that extra added layer of protection. Just a little rag. One thing that my tech teats has instilled in me is trying to keep things dry. So after I'm over here shredding on stage, sweating all over my stuff, my pedal board is getting sweat all over it, people are spilling beers all over the stage, it's crazy. One of the best little tiny insurance policies that you can have for your little pedal rig like this is just take a rag and set it inside. This rag will sort of suck up some of the humidity that's left in there, or whatever moisture's kind of left in there. And then basically the next day, now mind you, this is for when you're on tour, don't play a gig and let it get soaking wet and then sop it up with the rag and leave it in there. That's obviously a bad idea. But when you're touring and gigging on a daily basis, you can put this rag in here. Overnight, it's gonna suck up some of that humidity, and then you can take it and you air it out for the rest of the day, the next day, because none of the stuff stays packed up for too long. As soon as we get to the next gig, we unpack, we load in, we set up the stage, and all this stuff can kind of open up and air out for the rest of the day. And then there's another show that evening, and the cycle continues. Let's talk about what's going on inside of here. First of all, let's have a look at this cute little pedal board. Look at this guy. How sweet is that? It's such a sweet little guy. Let's lose our bag here for a second. You know, this thing This thing is cool, man. I like this guy. And you may have seen this in some of my older videos. I would use this a lot in some of my demo videos from last year. But this thing is about as streamlined as it gets for a pedal board. Now, mind you, I told you, again, my band only requires me to go from my guitar into my amp and have some high gain. And that's really it. I don't need effects, delays. I don't need any kind of reverbs or choruses or any other kind of fun stuff. We don't need any of these kinds of effects. We just need balls out heaviness the whole time. So my pedal board reflects that. On this board, the first thing that you'll notice in my signal path is gonna be my Line 6 G50 wireless. These wireless systems are super cool, man. And the great thing about it is you can still buy them. They're still available today. And I highly recommend the G50. I have played some pretty sizable stages, some massive stages, and I have had very few, if any, issues with this wireless. I sort of attribute that to the fact that this model still has antennae, right? Whereas some of the newer models have internal antennae, and they don't seem to reach quite as far, so your signal gets lost halfway across the stage. But little to no issues with this. I've had more issues with the transmitter pack than I have with the actual receiver. The transmitter pack, a couple little things seem to kind of like bother me about it. With the transmitter pack, I've had some issues with the actual lid for the battery compartment. Now, mind you, I've had these packs for years. I've toured with them for a very long time. Of course, when it's brand new, it's nice and sturdy, but when you've beat the shit out of it for years, it's not gonna be as in tip-top shape as it was, right? So, but easy enough, a little bit of gaff tape, and the lid will stay, it locks shut, but there's just times where it will be loose enough that the battery will actually like disconnect from the terminals inside, which kind of stinks, but if you take this guy and just tape it down, it's gonna be fixed. The other problem that I've had is that the cables that come with the transmitter stock are total garbage. If you do buy the G50, or really any of them that use this mini XLR sort of jack, if you buy any of these, swap out the cable for something heavy duty aftermarket immediately. And there's lots of options out there. You can go on ebay.com and look for Line 6 G50 cables, and you're gonna find a million of them. Spend 30 bucks on it. It will be well worth it, because the one that comes with it is gonna crap out on you in about a week. So that's that. And then the next thing on this little guy is, of course, a Boss TU3 tuner. Chromatic tuner, man. What else can I say about it? It's a tuner. You need a tuner. Now, the thing of it is, I use an Evertune, so I shouldn't really have to tune. But I would like to explain something very specific about the way that I use this tuner. What's really important and what's really awesome about Boss tuners is that they actually have a bypass out. I can set this thing that it goes into the input and then out of this secondary output that says bypass out, and not use the regular output. What this does is allows me to turn on the pedal and activate the tuner, but it does not mute the signal. This is really, really important in a live setting because, for instance, in Propane, we ring out a lot of open B at the end of songs and blah. If I have this thing set in this particular way, I can always read whether or not my open B is in tune. And I can know, like, if I hear that someone in the band is out of tune when we ring out those notes, I can look down and see if it's me. Now, I have my Evertune. Nowadays, that's never actually the case. I'm always the one that's in tune. But in the days where I was using my EC407 all the time, there was times when you would go out of tune and you would have to be able to spot check. It's much easier to spot check your tuning when it's always tuning, when it's always showing you what your tuning is. So I use the bypass out, and that takes me to my next pedal. I use my NS2, my noise suppressor, to actually mute. I don't know if you guys know this, any of you guys out there that are rocking Boss NS2 noise suppressors, there's this little switch that goes between reduction and mute. So you could use the noise suppressor as a mute instead of the actual Boss tuner. So what that means is that my Boss noise suppressor is also always on. There is no way to just turn it off. I can't step on it and then suddenly I'm gonna have a lot of signal going through. It's always being reduced, always. Now, the switch just allows me to mute the signal. To me, I think this is way more useful than turning the reduction on or off. Like, having to turn on the pedal in order to have noise reduction doesn't really make sense, you know what I mean? But when you set it up like this, the pedal then does two things. It's always doing noise reduction, but then it also allows you to mute. So in this case, if I do need to mute because I need to tune, I can just turn on the noise suppressor. It'll allow me to choke my signal so that I can focus on tuning my guitar and it's not being played out loud. This combination, in my opinion, is really, really powerful. But continuing to talk a little bit about this NS2, I have played a lot of noise suppressors. A lot of them. I've played them all. I've tried them all. And I'm telling you right now, after 25 years of playing Boss NS2s, I just can't go to any other noise suppressor and feel like the sensitivity is comfortable for me. This pedal has the best feel to it in my playing. I don't know, I've been using them forever. I have it where the decay is completely at 0 and I have the threshold almost entirely up, but just brought back about 1/8 of a turn so that there's just enough little space for the sound to cut through before it like is just choking everything. There's just something about this. I feel like there's more room to breathe with this noise suppressor, and it's not totally killing my sustain or my tone or anything like that. A lot of people use noise suppressors in the effects loop. I don't, because when you're playing at a live gig, honestly, nobody can hear the static of your guitar amp from the audience. The room is so loud when it's full of people and there's so much happening in the room that nobody can hear your amp going in most cases. And either way, as soon as you start to play, the volume of the amp is gonna be louder than that hiss anyway. So in this case, for me, I am without a noise suppressor in the effects loop. I am just a preamp noise suppressor guy with this little rig, and it works just fine for me. The last thing as far as my pedals go on this little board is this Maxxon 808 tube screamer. Now, I've told you guys 1,000 times in all of my videos where I'm talking about the EVH 5153 in all of its variations, that amp really does not need an overdrive. You could use that red channel and there's gonna be saturation for days. There's enough gain to take you from here to the moon easily. But when I'm playing with propane, I actually tend to use the blue channel more than I do the red channel. Something about the blue channel on the EVH is just a bit more open to me. It's a little bit more focused and it's just got a bit more overall presence. Not presence like top end, but overall like it just cuts. The only issue with that is it doesn't have quite as much gain as the red channel. That's where this guy comes in. The Maxxon OD808s, these are actually the original tube screamer circuits before Ibanez bought the design and started putting out the tube screamers that we're a bit more familiar with. There was the Maxxon 808. It's the same exact circuit, you know, a tube screamer is a tube screamer is a tube screamer. A lot of people might argue with me on that, but when you're using it in this way, there's not really much need for a lot of bells and whistles. A lot of people think that they need modded tube screamers to do all this crazy stuff. You kind of really don't, actually. You know, if you're using it in front of an amp, especially an amp like a 5150, like I am, this is where this reference comes from. If you're using it in front of that amp, it doesn't need any extra gain, really. Just a little bit of extra little compression goes a long way with an EVH or a 5150 of any sort, even the PV 5150s. Like, you don't need a lot of extra gain in front of that amp. It just doesn't need it. But it is nice to tighten it up a little bit or get a little bit more articulation in there to just cut out some of that flab. The old block letter 5150s tend to be very bass heavy. They're very woofy in the resonance. So tube screamers are great with them because tube screamers tend to cut off some of that low end frequency and push the mid frequency a little bit, which in my opinion is a frequency that the old block letter PV5150s are missing. So in this case, I've got this guy on here. My drive is at 0, my tone is at noon, and my level is usually at full blast. I might kick it back about a quarter turn, eighth to a quarter of a turn. But mostly what I'm trying to do is boost my signal into the amp that it just drives the tubes a little bit harder. That's sort of the point, right? It's an overdrive. It's a tube screamer. That's the whole idea, is to give the amp, the preamp, a little bit more information to begin with, that what comes out of that tends to be a bit more saturated. That's how the signal process works. That's what's called gain staging. If I was to play this through a clean channel, it would not sound like a heavy distortion. It would sound just like a little tiny bit of a crunchy guitar. That's it. It won't sound clean, but it's definitely not going to sound like some kind of a distortion pedal at all. Just a little bit of sizzle going into that amp does a lot. But in most cases, that's the idea. Blue channel, overdrive. And one of the very last things on this cool little pedal board that I'm really, really excited to share, because I don't think I've ever shared this particular piece of gear on this channel yet. So I'm really excited to say something about it. But these cool Pedal Train Nano Plus pedals, there is actually a wonderfully convenient power supply for your pedals. A company called Chox, C-I-O-K-S, Chox. These guys make a handful of pedal power supplies that have all the right types of power options for most of your pedals, up to 300 milliamps. You can run a Line 6 M5 with this power supply, no problem. 300 milliamps, you could run a Decibel 11 switch doctor with it. I have. My other pedal board, which we will talk about on another day because it's way more complicated, also has a Chox power supply. These things are freaking awesome. And on top of that, they make them small enough that they fit perfectly inside of the Pedal Train Nano boards. That is super cool, because most of the time you're gonna see a power supply, it's big, it's bulky, it comes with a bracket, it does all this crazy stuff. These guys don't. These guys come with a little template that you can drill out 2 holes, and then you can screw the power supply right to the bottom of the pedal board, and it's awesome. This one comes with 5 outputs, so I can run up to 5 pedals with it. I've never had an issue with any of it. We've got high and low power, and it's also switchable from 120 to 240 volts. This makes it so that all I have to do is swap out the actual plug that goes into the wall, hit that switch, and I can take this rig international, US, Europe, no problem. So that's a really, really, really powerful, powerful, powerful setup in my opinion. Something like this is really all you need when you're playing in a heavy band, especially like me. I'm the rhythm guitar player. I'm not doing a lot of crazy stuff. Now, my other guitar player, he's usually rocking a wah, sometimes a boost, depending on, how he's feeling. There's a lot of other things that are going on his pedal board. But even still, mostly simple stuff. No extra delays, no extra effects, just something like wah or characteristic effects, things that he's controlling manually. For me, just full bore, that's it. Just punch all day, that's all I'm going for. And this little pedal board does that for me perfectly. All right, guys, well, I hope you've enjoyed this second episode of my live rig rundown. If you did, you know the drill. Like, subscribe, drop me a comment down below. Let me know what you think. Tell me what's on your pedal board. Do you got a secret weapon pedal that you just can't live without? Tell me about it down below. Do yourself a favor, head over to the Madman Music merch shop, pick yourself up a t-shirt. Each purchase directly supports the channel. So until next time, stay crazy. Peace. Head over to Madman Music. Head over to the Madman Music merch shop. Grab yourself a t-shirt. Go become a patron. Head over to the Madman Music merch shop. Grab yourself a t-shirt. Go become a patron.